Let's talk about what I read in the second half of November. Hi, my name is Jeanette, and I want to thank you for joining me on the channel Jane Reads. So, I read 5 books in the second half of November. I have finished one physically, I listened to one on audiobook, and I read 3 on my Kindle. So, let's start with the first book that I finished this month, the second half of this month. And that was Take a Chance on Me by Becky Wade. This is a prequel novella to the Misty River series. So it introduces us to the community of Misty River and kind of, I would say some of the characters, but not really, because we have a very brief viewing in book 1 of one of the characters in this book, but not really. So it's more the community of Misty River, I think, is why. Now, I struggle with novellas, and I kind of tend to stay away from them a lot because I just find them too short. I want to know more about the story. If I get to know the characters, I want to keep going. I want to know more. I want to know deeper, and I'm not a short story person. I'm just not. But I was starting this series, and I wanted the novella because I gotta start a series at the beginning, and there's a prequel, so let's read it, get to know the community. So in this one, we are following Penelope Quinn and Eli Price. Now, Penelope is the sister of Eli's best friend, and her brother calls her for help and also calls Eli for help. The two show up at the same time to help the brother, and so we are following kind of why they got called for help. So there is a really heavy side topic happening, but then there's the sweet romance. And personally, I didn't care about the romance between Penelope and Eli. I just didn't. I really cared about what was happening on the other side, why they got called, that whole situation. And there wasn't, I don't know, it was so weird for a novella to have such a heavy subject matter happening and then a romance. And I really cared about the heavy subject. And are they going to be okay? What's going on? This is such a sad situation that's happening and that they're dealing with, right? So for me, the book just kind of fell flat a little bit. And then I started book 1, which is Stay With Me, where I was really expecting the characters that we'd met and more. But it's almost, as I said, it's like the prequel was to introduce us to the community, not so much the characters. Now, Eli does make a brief appearance in book 1, but it's brief, hardly mentioned, and I don't even know if Penelope's name was mentioned, honestly. I don't remember. So, in Stay With Me, so the Misty River series is focusing on 5 kids who are considered the Miracle 5, who, I don't know how many years ago. Did I even write down how many years ago? These 5 kids from Misty River were on a missions trip in Ecuador. And an earthquake happened, and they got trapped in a building, and they were rescued, and that is why they're called the Miracle 5, because of the situation that happened. It's a miracle that they got out. And so they spent a number of years, at least 4 of the 5 kids spent a number of years talking about their experiences and going on. And so in book 1, we are following Genevieve and her sister Natasha, who are 2 of the 5 kids. They're the primary roles in this book. And then the love interest is Sam Turner, who is from Australia but living in Georgia. And we get to know his background. He's kind of half Australian, half American, and he's kind of settled in Georgia. But he's he keeps to himself. He runs a business in town and people know who he is and he interacts and stuff, but on his property he keeps to himself. On his ranch he keeps to himself. farm, whatever. And so Genevieve happens to show up there and kind of, not under great circumstances, it kind of pushes herself a little bit on Sam. Not like, that could sound really bad. Not that way. More like kind of invading his space and making him do what he doesn't want to do, really. Kind of interacting with her, right? And so at the end of every single chapter, there was a flashback scene to this situation, to the earthquake situation in Ecuador. And in that, each chapter during that flashback is told from a different one of the 5 kids' perspectives, which I found really interesting, but I also didn't like how it was at the end of each chapter. We're reading the story either from Genevieve's perspective or Sam's perspective, and then all of a sudden it jumps to this flashback scene from another person's perspective, like say Natasha's perspective. And then we go into the next chapter where it starts with either Genevieve or Sam's point of view. And I'm just like, it took me out of the story each time it happened. And it happened at the end of every single chapter. Now, the good thing is that the chapters are long, so it doesn't happen that often, but often enough that it frustrated me, because I would have been very happy to know the earthquake story like at the very beginning of the book. And then kind of, okay, so this is what happened so many years ago and now, right? But other than like the earthquake story and knowing like kind of what Genevieve experienced, which we still only learn in little bits as we're getting through the story, but because of her experience then, it's kind of turned her into who she is now and how she approaches life now, right? Like, does that make sense at all? So I would have liked to know all that at the beginning rather than slowly throughout the book. But that's my perspective. And a relationship does form between characters, but it's not defined. They're unsure whether they're friends or if they're like now dating or if they're what their status is, but yet there's a lot of kissing between them. And I don't have a problem with like kissing scenes in books or anything like that, but then they have this kiss makeout session kind of thing, and then they're questioning, not with each other, like kind of in their minds or with somebody else, well, what is your status with that person? Are you guys now seeing each other? Are you now what? And they don't know. And I was like, well, it just, I don't know, that really bothered me, because it was like, if you're having that physical relationship with somebody, yet you don't know what your status of your relationship is, maybe discuss that. I don't know. Oh, and then there's one chapter in this that all of a sudden it's somebody else's completely different view. And I was so lost. And I was reading this on my Kindle, and I thought, oh, is there an error in my Kindle? Like, what? Like, because, yeah, it's one of the Miracle 5 kids, but it's not part of the earthquake story. Like, it's current times. And I was like, wait, what? Like, I mean, as I got to the end of the book, I know why it was included, because it builds up to book 2. But it was like, that felt really out of place. And really, like, I had to stop and like, what is going on? So that, again, really bothered me. So I gave this book 3 stars because I just struggled with it. And I was really disappointed, because I've really enjoyed Becky Wade in the past. And I've never felt this way about one of her books before. The way it was written, I don't know, it just bothered me. And I didn't connect with the characters as much as I have connected with other characters. So that kind of, I think that took away my enjoyment of the story as well. But I will continue this series, because book 1s aren't always hits for me anyways. I know that. So I will continue this series, and I have hopes that I enjoy book 2 and book 3 much more than this one, because I'm not giving up, because I know from past experiences that I've really enjoyed Becky Wade's stories. This one wasn't it for me. Then I finished Life Support by Robert Whitlow. This is the one that I listened to. We're going with not hits here, okay? One, I listened to this, and I'm slowly getting into audiobooks. I think this is my 18th one I've listened to so far this year, but this is the first audiobook that I have listened to that had no chapter breaks. And like it just moved weird to me. It just moved weird to me and jumped at times, and I had no idea what was going on or where, like whose perspective we were with now. And I wanted the chapter breaks, or the no chapter breaks, really threw me off because I had no idea where we were in the story. Which, I mean, if you get really invested in the story and then all of a sudden it comes up with like chapter 18 and then starts, I get how that can take you away from the story as well. Like, I totally get that. But the fact that there was none, it didn't let me know that, okay, now we're on to a new scene. Right? So in this one, we are following Rena Richardson and Baxter Richardson, and they were at the waterfall, and something happens. Baxter gets hurt, and now he's in a coma in the hospital. Rena hires Alexa Lindell as her lawyer to protect Baxter. Basically, she feels like she is following Baxter's wishes, that he doesn't want to be in coma, doesn't want to be in a vegetative state. But Baxter's father is fighting to keep him on the life support, and they end up going to court to decide whose power of... I just completely lost the name. Power of attorney? Is that correct? Like, wow. My mind just totally went blank. Because when I say power... No, I think that's right. Because the father has a power of attorney from when Baxter turned 18 that he signed, but then he also signed another one when he got married to Rena, and kind of the father is money. He has money and feels that his is more like kind of overrides the one that he signed when he married Rena. And so the two, Rena and the dad, don't really get along very well. And Rena feels that Baxter doesn't want to be on life support, let's end it. But the dad might have ulterior motives of why he he loves his son, but there might be ulterior motives behind it to also keep him alive. And he doesn't treat Rena very well, the dad. So then comes Alexa, trying to kind of navigate these waters. And we as readers know what happened at the waterfall. Alexa has no idea. The hospital staff have no idea. The police have no idea. So knowing like what I knew happened, it was hard to root for certain characters and want things to go a certain way. But knowing that Alexa has no idea on anything, I really liked her and wanted her to be able to figure this out and kind of make sure she's fighting for the right person or the right circumstances, like kind of doing God's will. Alexa is not a Christian at the beginning of the story. Through a different case, she ends up meeting Pastor Ted Morgan, who is a musical pastor at a local church. And they kind of get to know each other. They have some common bonds with the love of classical music. And so they get to know each other. And then there's a scene where Ted leads Alexa to Christ. And I loved that scene. Loved it. And then it was kind of, so you see the two of them kind of grow in a friendship while he's also like teaching her about God. I really enjoyed that. And I really enjoyed like her determination to be right. Like to be right, to do what is right. And not just to take her client's word for it or her boss's word for it or the other, like the police's word for it, like kind of really dig into, try to figure out all the answers. And I really enjoyed her interactions with her secretary, Gwen. They just, every time they talked and stuff, it was really like, I just loved it. The banter back and forth or the way they worked together, like I loved that relationship. But then it disappears halfway through the book. And I mean, I know why it disappeared, but it was like, even after like the main incident of why it disappeared, but then there was some, and then it disappeared like completely, and I was like, did somebody move out? Like, why? Like, it just, I don't know, it was dropped, and that really bothered me. And then there's other parts of the book, like Alexa goes on vacation to France, and I mean, it's detailed to a certain extent. It's probably only a chapter, maybe a chapter and a half. But it was like, it had no relevance to the case or anything that was going on. And it was like, it could have been summed up in like, you know, she went to France and now she, you know, like, so she's been away for a week. Now she's back. It didn't need like what she saw in France and why, because it just wasn't relevant to any part of the story. I don't know why it was included. Now, this book ends on a cliffhanger. Like, the story is not wrapped up at all. The last line of this book is the first line of book 2. So obviously, I moved on to book 2. I am currently listening to it right now. I am enjoying it more than I'm enjoying this book. However, it still doesn't have chapter breaks. It just kind of plays a little bit of music and then moves on. But it doesn't even play the music, like it plays the music between scenes, but there's not even a chapter break. When I was looking at my phone and watching it, like kind of, it was like, oh, well, I thought that would have been a chapter change, but it wasn't. So just the audio recording is a little weird for this personally, but that's also somebody who's not used to audio recordings, so take that with a grain of salt. So I did enjoy this book at times, but it was hard to root for certain characters when I knew the background. So I give this book 3 stars, and I immediately moved on to the next one because I need to know. Okay, then I'd had a few 3-star books. It was time for something different. So I decided to pick up a reread, a book that I knew I enjoyed in the past, and I thought, okay, let's do this. So I reread Short Straw Bride by Karen Witemeyer. This is a historical romance set in 1882 in Texas. And we are following Travis Archer and his 3 brothers and Meredith Hayes. So Travis has taken on the responsibility of his 3 younger brothers after losing his parents 14 years ago. The very first scene in the book is when Meredith and Travis first meet 11 years prior. And so Meredith is a young girl, like 12 years old, maybe 11 years old. And so they first meet there. And there's kind of, this is shortly after Travis, like the Archer parents have passed away. And there's kind of rumors going on about the Archer family and don't go onto their land, and the Archers never leave their land. And so it's kind of, there's a ton of stories going on that kids tell about the Archers. Well, Meredith ends up meeting Travis and kind of falls for him, you know, a schoolgirl crush, right? And he breaks his promise to his dad that he had said, like, I'll stay on the land, take care of the land. And he has not left the land for 14 years, except for this one time that he left to help Meredith. And now it is 11 years later from when they first meet, and Meredith overhears something that will affect Travis negatively. And she decides, I'm going to tell him. I don't care, I'm going to tell him. She's had no interaction with him in those 11 years. So she goes out to the ranch, kind of ignores all the signs that are there, that, like not welcome to visitors kind of thing, because the Archer brothers have really kind of closed themselves off to the community and they look after themselves. And she ignores that, goes up, things happen, and because of things that happen, she ends up spending more time on the ranch than she planned. Her uncle isn't too happy about that and forces a marriage on her. I mean, he was trying to force a marriage before, but now, because of all the situation that happened, you have to marry one of these people. So she ends up in a forced marriage. And Travis ends up in a forced marriage. And it's really entertaining to watch the way they kind of work through this, and with the three brothers that are in the background. Like, in the background there, I mean, they're also on the ranch, in the house, right? And I really enjoyed these characters and the way they interacted with one another. And Meredith is able to, like, kind of teach Travis and the Archer brothers kind of to open themselves up and trust other people, and locking yourselves away isn't the answer. But then Travis, because we get the story told in both points of view, which I really enjoy when they do that. And we find out what kind of Travis is thinking, and he's determined to kind of, he's made the decision, okay, I'm getting married. I'm going to respect Meredith and not force anything on her. And so he has decided to court his wife, as if they were originally dating before they got married, right? And I loved it. It's just such a fun story, and watching the way it develops. And then there is another romance that happens while we're following the main romance. And it's such an enjoyable read. And there is tension that happens. There are moments of, will they get out of this alive? Because there's some really, like, there's some towns members that are after them and aren't too happy with them, or want stuff from them. And I had read this book, I don't know how many years ago originally, but at that time I didn't know this. And then within the last year, I discovered an article that was written, kind of an interview of Karen Witemeyer and this book. And Karen said she got this idea from watching the movie, like the old musical, Seven Brides for Seven Brothers. And I love that musical. And so kind of knowing that and reading this now, and I'm like, oh, I totally get how she was inspired from that movie for this book. And there were certain scenes in this book that I was like, yep, that reminds me of that musical. This was such a fun, light read, just enjoyable. I give it 5 stars again because I just like these characters. And yeah, I really want to read book 2 now. Again, I have read it before because now I want to follow some of the other brothers and get to know their stories. So yeah, that was that one. And then the book that I just finished is Broken Things by Andrea Boeshaar. So this was the 6th book on my TBR when I played my TBR game. And I kind of put off picking it up because I didn't think I would enjoy it. It's a book I've had on my shelf for a number of years. And when I read the back, it just didn't sound like something that I would really enjoy, but I wanted to give it a chance. But after having quite a few 3 stars in a row, I was like, and I need something, so that's why I picked up a reread that I really enjoyed before reading this one. Wow. I didn't love it, but I also did not hate it. I quickly became invested in these characters and wanting to know what was going on. and I would think about the characters when I wasn't reading it. And so we are following Allie Lidenberg, who her son has just gotten married. Her husband has passed away quite a few years ago, and she's in her early 50s now. And so she has returned to her hometown of Chicago to try to kind of right some wrongs. She didn't leave under the best circumstances at the time, and she wants to kind of reconnect with her stepsisters and kind of fix some broken relationships, hence broken things. And so she comes back to town, and she connects with Steve Callahan, who is her ex-boyfriend's brother. And the way that Steve and his wife Nora kind of welcomed her in and kind of made her feel comfortable. And Allie is in town working. That is why, like, she's a consultant, has arrived in town for a short-term, long-term basis. And so they invite her over for supper, they invite her to her church, they really make her feel welcome to the community. I loved Steve and Nora. Loved them. And then through that, she ends up reconnecting with her ex, Jack, and she discovers kind of how things have changed over the years. So Jack first introduced her to Christ, and then the breakup happened, everything happened, and through circumstances through her life after that, like, Allie wasn't following Christ, and then came back, and now, like, prior to, like, reintroducing with Steve and stuff, she is now a Christian, a very strong Christian, and hence why she wants to kind of fix some of the relationships that she feels she broke, and kind of patch things up. And so we meet Jack. Jack is no longer a Christian because of stuff that he's gone through. So they've done complete opposites. And it was hard to find out how Jack was treated, especially by a pastor. Like, it was just like, really? And that pastor's reaction had such a negative impact on so much. And I was just like, really? Oh, that. Because, like, if he had reacted differently, things might have been differently for Jack. He might not have turned out the way he is now. And so it was interesting. But then we have Jack's son, Logan. And he is a great young man, a youth pastor at the church. And we find out how Steve and Nora have really helped Jack with Logan. And, I mean, Logan's attitude could have been completely different about things with everything that happened with his mother, who is not Allie, with his mother. But it's not. And so we're following Allie finding forgiveness, mending broken relationships. Jack kind of dealing with everything that's happened, and Allie's back, and now what? Then we're following Logan and in his position as a youth pastor and in his relationship with his girlfriend and kind of progressing things forward there. And then Allie meets a patient at the place that she's working and is trying to work with that patient and trying to lead that patient to Christ and trying to make things comfortable for her. And I really got invested in that and really enjoyed following these different characters and seeing. But we're also following, like, Allie trying to reconnect with her stepsisters. And one stepsister is really open to establishing a relationship with Allie. The other stepsister doesn't treat her very well. And so, like, kind of is navigating all those different waters, different personalities, different treatments, different, right? Like, I was really interested in that. I loved following Logan and his girlfriend's relationship and kind of seeing it progress and just the way they supported one another. And they are going through some trials, especially near the end. Like, But the way they handled those trials gives me hope for their future. Like, they're gonna survive. The way they handle these trials now, I have really high hopes for the future. But there's a little twist that is revealed about halfway through. But as soon as we met, I was like, I know what's gonna happen here. Like, I suspected it. So then when it was revealed, I'm like, yeah, I knew that. And I don't know if, like, we were supposed to be able to figure that out before it was happened, but to me, it was very obvious. Like, I just knew where this story was going to go with that side of things. But the way that it ended with that particular situation was really a positive note. And, like, Logan and Allie have such a great influence on those around them. Now, what I didn't like about the story, at times, Allie is a 50-year-old woman, but is acting really immature sometimes. Like, there is one particular scene where I was like, did you really just do that? Really? Like, it felt kind of like, they were much younger than what they were. I mean, like, Jack does some things too that he's the same age, and was like, your son is acting more mature than you, and your son is mid-20s. Like, come on, really? So that kind of bothered me. And the other thing is, this story doesn't wrap up in this book. At least I don't think it does. I mean, we've got some closure, but not as much closure as I would want. Now, it is book 1 of a series, so maybe it continues, like, gets kind of finalized in the rest of the series. But I did read the summary of book 2, and it doesn't really seem like it does. So I don't know. But it's possible the summary doesn't tell you everything, right? I mean, obviously the summary doesn't tell you everything. So we'll see. But I gave this book 3 stars because I really enjoyed some of the characters and, like, kind of some of the storylines and the faith in this story. Like, it is definitely faith-filled. I mean, we're following a youth pastor. We're following a Christian trying to make up, like, kind of seek forgiveness from those she feels she's hurt. But faith is openly discussed between so many characters. I really enjoyed that. It's just sometimes I didn't connect with the characters and how they reacted with it. And it just, I don't know, like, it just, maybe it should be a 4. But I wouldn't reread it, so that makes it a 3. I don't know. I'm not doing very well at explaining it, am I? Or what I didn't like about it. I think it's just, I just felt the characters were a little immature at times and could have reacted a little bit better to certain situations. And the fact that I knew what was going to happen, or I had high suspicions of what was going to happen, I think that's what took it down for me. So yeah. So anyways, that is what I have read in the second half of November. So really, my favorite books were both rereads this month. Oh well, that happens sometimes. But I got another 10 books off my list, so I am happy with that. So yeah, that is what I read in the month of November. I want to thank you for taking the time to watch this video, and I hope you have a great day. Bye.